Hi, I'm Andrea and welcome back to my writing channel. Today I'm going to be doing my very first Q&A here. I have done so many of these in the past, but never on my writing channel. So I asked you on Instagram for writing and bookish related questions only, and you guys delivered. There are some really fun questions in here and I cannot wait to answer them. But if I don't have time to answer all of them today, which is very possible, then feel free to leave them in the comments below or send me another message on Instagram and I will answer them in a story. First question, do you have a book that you just can't finish no matter how hard you try? Either it's too boring, long, etc. This is great timing for this question because if you saw my last video about bad reading habits, you know that in the past I have struggled a lot with DNFing books, so stopping reading books before I finish them. I've gotten a lot better, so I can safely say that I don't currently have a book like this, but in the recent past, one that was definitely a problem for me for a while was The Silmarillion by Tolkien. I struggled so much to read this book and I wanted to so badly because I love The Lord of the Rings. You know that already. I've said that a million times on this channel alone, and then my other channel I've said it a million more times. I love The Lord of the Rings. It's my favorite series and the world is amazing, so I thought The Silmarillion is going to be great because I'll just learn more about the world and that will just make me love it even more. But The Silmarillion's not really a novel as much as it's kind of like a history, so it kind of feels like someone just summing up hundreds of years of history of this fantasy world. So while there are definitely some really interesting things about it, it's not really the same storytelling experience as Lord of the Rings. That was a struggle for me for a while and I eventually did finish it. When first planning a story, how do you organize all your what ifs into a coherent first draft? Very good question, and I think it's kind of multifaceted, as a lot of writing questions tend to be. For me, a lot of the what ifs were definitely hashed out in the brainstorming and outlining phases. I think this is one of the most useful things about an outline to me as a plotter, a hardcore plotter, because I can really experiment with those what ifs in a more fleshed out way than just brainstorming, but not so detailed as a first draft to where, you know, a lot of those what ifs go into the first draft and then you have to redraft and redraft and redraft and figure out, you know, things didn't work like you wanted. Obviously that happens with outlines as well, but just on a much smaller scale. I feel like I take a long time to write my outline, and the reason I take so long is because I'm kind of testing out these what ifs in my, I guess, like pre-draft environment, let's say. So for me, the story starts with, you know, the brainstorming and, you know, getting the idea of the concept and the characters, and I just start writing a bunch of stuff down, and some of it sticks, some of it doesn't. Even when I have random ideas, I write them down, often in notes on my phone, because often I get random ideas when I'm out and about. Not currently in quarantine, but, you know, on a normal average day. And then when it comes time to have a brainstorming or a writing session, I will look at all those notes and figure out what I still like and what maybe I don't like anymore, and then I'll transfer them into my note in Evernote. I use Evernote for my novels, and within Evernote I have multiple different notes within a notebook, and one of those notes is just basic details and random ideas, and then once I decide which ones I like and don't like, I put them into either the character file or the world file or whatever file they go into, the official note with, you know, kind of my canon of my story. As I've been doing my revisions, I've been going through that note, that one like random idea note, and I found so many things that either I decided not to do or they were like the first bud of what blossomed into something very important to my story or very key in my story, and it just started out as a random what if this, and I put it in the ideas, and then it ended up getting worked into my story. What's really key is just to give the idea sufficient time to develop. So, you know, have the idea, work it into your kind of brainstorming and your world building, or, you know, whatever aspect of the story it belongs in. Think about it, test it out. You know, if this happened, or if a character was, you know, motivated by this, or if this, you know, event happened, or whatever it is you're thinking about, really delve into that idea and think about all the possible consequences. If it's through brainstorming or outlining or even writing it into a first draft, if that's what you prefer, if that's what works for you, really give it time to flourish and see how it works in the story and look at things very critically, I think. This question is in French, so I'm going to read the French first and then I'm going to translate it in English for you. Est-ce une vérité ou un cliché de dire que la langue française est plus riche que l'anglais pour s'exprimer? So is it true or a cliche to say that the French language is richer than English to express yourself? As a general statement, I would say absolutely not. I'm not actually sure I've heard this particular cliche about French, that it's just generally better to express yourself. I think with any language in the world, there are some things a language can do and some things it can't. So every language is going to have those moments when there's a better way to say it in a different language, or there's a specific way that you can say something in a specific language that just can't be mimicked in any other language. It's the same with French and English. There are some things that, you know, just flow better in French, or ideas that are conveyed so much more poetically, for example, in French, or just better, you know, that hit the nail on the head a little bit better. By the same token, there are some things that are way easier or better to express in English. For me, even though I'm fluent in French, I'm a native English speaker, and English is always going to be my comfort zone when it comes to expressing myself. I'm always going to feel more comfortable in English. I'm always going to feel like there's more possibility because I just know it so much better. And not even just as a native speaker, I've always been a creative person. I've always expressed myself creatively on the page. I've studied literature and the English language. I've even taught English as a second language, so I know it really, really, really well by now. Not that there's not stuff that I'm constantly not learning. There are things that I'm learning every day about English, but I just know it a lot better than any other language. When you do decide to publish, do you prefer self-publication, traditional publication, or hybrid? Right now, the goal is traditional publication. This, from the beginning, has been my idea. That's the method that I've had in mind as I've been writing this current work in progress that's currently in revisions. I'm thinking about traditional publication. I'm thinking about the specifications of that in terms of word count, in terms of style, in terms of everything about the book. I'm really thinking about how to market it for traditional publication. That being said, I have thought about self-publication. The idea is appealing to me, especially as someone who has kind of an entrepreneurial spirit already. I like stuff like that. I like the idea of having more control over my book and having more control over the entire publication process. Obviously, there are huge challenges with self-publication, and I'm trying to become more aware of those, even though I'm not actively pursuing self-publication right now. I'm watching a lot of author-tubers who are self-published, and I'm watching a lot of their advice videos and stuff like that, just to kind of learn a little bit more about the process and how it works. And it is really interesting to me. It's very possible that I will try it in the future, so maybe I'll end up being a hybrid writer in both, you know, self-pub and traditional pub. But at this point, traditional is kind of the way that I'm going, and I would like to get my current work in progress traditionally published. Help on how to make the beginning of a story gripping. This is a huge question, actually. I could make an entire video or a series of videos on this topic, and to be honest, there's not any sort of right or wrong. There's so much advice that could be given, but it's going to vary so much based on your individual story. So generally, kind of an overall piece of advice that I would recommend is not just the generic advice of starting in the middle of action. That's the one that you'll probably hear a lot and read a lot. And it's a good one. I mean, it's not a bad idea to think about that, but it doesn't have to be a really big, you know, like a fight scene or like a really, really intense scene. It doesn't have to be that big scale. I think the key is just starting in a place that immediately you're in the story. So not description of the world or description of the character or, you know, really opening it up like you might like a campfire side story, but something needs to be happening. I think you kind of need to feel like you're jumping on a Ferris wheel, for example, and the Ferris wheel doesn't stop. You just need to kind of hop on when it gets slow at the bottom, jump on, and then pull you up. You don't have to start at the top of the Ferris wheel. You just need to keep things rolling where you really feel like you're stepping into a mobile world, if that makes sense. That's kind of how I think about it. I hope that helps you. If you'd like me to develop on this a little bit more and talk about the subject in a future video, definitely let me know in the comments. There are also some really fantastic videos already made and uploaded by other author tubers if you want to check some of those out. Is it more fun to write dialogue or description? Both. Sometimes. It really depends on the situation. I've had so much fun with both. I think maybe dialogue is a little bit more fun because you actually have a lot of characterization to pack into dialogue. With my recent 2 books, I've had so much fun trying to pack as much characterization in the dialogue, to really think about how my characters are speaking, because that's much more realistic. I mean, everyone has a very different way of speaking. My early novels, I think there was a little bit too much, you know, gray. Everyone kind of sounded kind of similar, with a few exceptions, but I'm having a lot of fun with my current work in progress, thinking about how different people speak and interact with each other, and it's been a lot of fun. At the same time, description can be super fun too. If you're talking description in terms of actually describing things, or, you know, kind of the descriptive passages within narrative, probably dialogue would generally win. But if you're talking all the narrative outside of dialogue, there's definitely a lot of fun with writing that as well. And I'm trying with this current work in progress, I've tried some different types of phrasing and sentence length and sentence style that I never tried before, and I don't know if it'll work, or I don't know if all of it will work, but I had a lot of fun with it. In general, I think just as I grow as a writer, I have more fun with things because I start to understand how they work a little bit better. So I get a little bit bolder and I get a little bit more adventurous with trying what I'm doing. So short answer, I don't have a favorite. It really just depends on what scene I'm writing. Pro or anti cursing in books? Do yours have them? I do not care, honestly. I've read books from both camps. I've read books from the middle camp as well, just kind of using some swear words, but not a ton of them, or not certain ones. I really don't mind. I think a lot of it has to do with the world itself and the writing style. It really just needs to be consistent. So if I am diving into a story that's super gritty, that the writing style is a certain way that it just works with lots of cursing, I really don't have a problem with it. I don't care if it's all throughout the book. I don't care if it's just one character who curses a lot. I think it just needs to be done consciously. And by the same token, if there's no cursing whatsoever, I'm also okay with that. I know some people say it's super unrealistic, but at the end of the day, fiction is fiction, and whatever world you create, whether it's a fantasy world or just kind of an alternate real world, you can choose whether or not you want cursing to be an active part of it or not. In my books, I have some cursing, not a lot of cursing and not certain words. I don't use the super hardcore curse words, but there is some cursing. I kind of use it in a similar way to how I use it in real life, because in real life I do curse. I don't curse a lot. I know in my videos I rarely ever curse, so you might think that I don't, but I do. I just don't tend to use the super hardcore words, and I don't do it that often. I only occasionally do, and normally when I'm really upset or I'm really just emotional, some sort of emotion, I might curse. So that's kind of how I use it in my books as well. For me, the thing that really matters is just that it fits, that it doesn't feel like forced cursing, like you're trying so hard to pack a ton of cursing in for no reason other than just to make it a bit grittier. But also I don't want it to feel like you've, you know, written a really great story but then subtracted all the curse words to make sure you don't have any curse words. You know, it needs to feel like it's organically written that way. How do you remember all the books you've read? P.S. I enjoy your videos a lot. Thank you so much. I'm really glad that you like my videos, but I have to say, I don't remember all the books that I've read. So many books rented from the library or read during university, where I rented them from the university library or the bookstore. So I don't have them now, but I definitely read them. I might have even written essays on them, and yet gone from memory forever. Goodreads has been a huge help for this because I can actually go back and check if it's marked as read or not read or want to read. I can check to see if I have some sort of actual proof that I've read it, but there's tons of stuff that are not, you know, books that are not marked on my Goodreads because I read them before I got Goodreads. I only got it a few years ago, so most of my university reads, unless they made a big impression on me, they're not marked on my Goodreads, so I have no, you know, evidence that I've read them. It's a shame I didn't keep all those syllabi. Now I really try hard to mark everything on Goodreads so that I don't forget that I've read something, but even the ones that are marked read on Goodreads, a lot of times when I go back and read the blurb, it takes me a little bit to actually remember the premise and remember the book itself. And if I were to reread the book, I probably would be rediscovering it in a lot of ways. What's the longest book you've read? What is the longest book that I've read? As I've just admitted, I definitely don't remember all the books that I've read, so I couldn't tell you for sure the longest book that I've read. And also the only really fair way to do this would be to go by word count, but I don't actually know the word counts of most of the books that I've read. So I did a little bit of Googling to figure out the word counts of a few of the books that I thought could potentially be contenders for the longest ones that I've read. And if memory and Google are correct and not failing me, I think it would have to be Bleak House by Charles Dickens. According to Google, it's over 377,000 words, and according to my Goodreads, I have read it, but I'll admit I do not remember so much of this book. I remember certain things as I was reading the blurb about it and as I was reading a little bit of a synopsis. I remember some character names and some things so well, and then other things are just, like I said, completely gone from my head. Following that would probably be Game of Thrones, because Game of Thrones, let me see, I just looked this up. I think it was almost 300,000 words. It was just shy, a few thousand words shy of 300,000. So it's considerably shorter than Charles Dickens actually, but still quite long. And I've read the first Game of Thrones book. I haven't read any more than that, which makes me very sad to admit. I think that's a good question to end on because I would like to turn this one over to you guys now. What is the longest book that you can think of that you've read, and go by word count, please, not page count, because sometimes, you know, the font and the size and everything will change, but by word count alone, what is the longest book that you've read? I hope you enjoyed this Q&A, and I definitely did not get through all of the questions, so like I said, leave them in the comments below if you'd like, or send me a message on Instagram. I also will probably do another Instagram Q&A at some point where I can answer your questions in stories. If you want me to do more bookish and writing Q&As in the future on this channel, definitely give this video a like so that I can see that you enjoyed it, and subscribe and turn on notifications if you want to be alerted as soon as I upload new videos. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you very soon in another writing video.